done that. Just so you know, like we said on our invite, we are recording today's meeting just so folks who weren't able to attend can watch if they'd like. Let's see, we have a lot of folks on the call, so maybe if folks want to introduce themselves maybe in the chat, so that way we can just jump right into the presentation here. I'll move through the presentation and leave plenty of time for questions and answers. Yeah, Alana, am I missing anything? Oh, I should say I'm joined here by my colleague, Alana Miller. So Alana is here as well. Did I miss anything, Alana?
Nope, sounds good.
Cool. All right, we'll jump in. There we go. So just a quick refresher for any folks who aren't totally familiar with TDM. I think most folks on the call probably are, but just a reminder that TDM is Transportation Demand Management, TDM, strategies that shift the how, when, and where of people's travel behavior to really help us increase the system efficiency, reducing occupancy vehicle trips, right, which has huge climate implications and quality of life implications, and then just help us achieve some specific planning goals. I'm sure you're all familiar with this image. I like showing this of what it looks like, 40 folks going down a street all in a car, all on a bus, all on bikes. What I always like to say in these TDM meetings is this isn't saying everyone has to take the bus, everyone has to ride their bike, but if we better distribute our trips in our city across the spectrum instead of all being all in single occupancy vehicles, we can exponentially increase the efficiency and throughput of our roadways, which is really critical. So we're not all sitting in traffic, and we're able to accommodate some growth in the city. A couple more pieces of why I really wanted to highlight this with this group, why the city is pursuing TDM. So you can see in the upper right, there's some graphs, donut graphs, or I forget what they're called exactly, but you can see our existing mode share, right? We're about 73% drive alone, 6% transit, 6% walk bike. We do have goals to decrease the single occupancy vehicle trips down to 50% and increase walk bike and transit to 15% apiece. And so that's a key goal that the city has, that TDM is a piece of the puzzle in helping to solve, right? It's not the end all be all. There's many other programs that the city's working on to help achieve those goals, but this is one important piece. It's also an important piece in our climate goals of reducing emissions. I think that's of interest to everyone, right? We're in serious non-attainment in this area. So we really need to start, looking at ways that we can limit our emissions. And by switching folks to more sustainable modes, of course, we're able to start making a dent there. And then safety, zero traffic deaths. The more we have folks moving around in different modes, the more we can, create safer places for folks to walk, bike, use transit, all that good stuff. I'm really focused on mobility freedom for our residents, right? And that, that comes in many different ways, but one of the biggest ways that TDM can help is by offering strategies that reduce some of those transportation costs that a family has, which, Alana, correct me if I'm wrong, I think is like the second highest cost that a family has behind housing. Mm-hmm. And so, the more that we can impact that, the more, freedom folks really have financially to be able to do other things and not feel so burdened. I touched on the growth aspect before. You're all familiar with that. We're growing a lot. We need to accommodate more people on our roadways, but don't necessarily want to be expanding them all, right? We don't either have the room or want to be expanding them to accommodate more and more and more cars, right? We know that doesn't work. Active transportation has health benefits, of course, and then plan recommendations. It's important to highlight that many of these plans, Blueprint, Comprehensive Plan, Denver Roads Transit, the East and East Central Area plans that aren't listed here, all of them call for the city to implement a regulation that requires new developments to have TDM strategies. And so we're really acting on all of those. So what is the requirement that we're putting forward? Now we're diving in. The TDM regulation, it is a citywide requirement, so there's no sections of the city that are excluded. It's for all new development going through the site plan and LDR processes. There's a little bit more there, right? If any of you are familiar with the intricacies of zoning in Denver, there's like a former Chapter 59 that something like 20% of the city is still zoned under. So it's not just site plan and LDR. We also have all of those equal processes that are in that other zoning code looped in as well. So we're getting folks, if someone comes in to develop under one of those, they're still getting looped in here, but it's easy just to say that site plan and LDR process that folks are familiar with. We are moving this forward in a two-step approach. So first we have an ordinance, and then we'll follow that with rules and regulations. The ordinance is really brief, and it's actually scheduled for council committee, the Land Use and Transportation Committee, next Tuesday to start that council process. But it's really brief. It really sets the stage for what the rules and regulations will do. So it basically enables us to do rules and regulations and start setting the stage for a tiered approach to implementing this, that there's going to be monitoring, enforcement, and compliance. And then the rules and regulations, which will be adopted by the executive director of DOTI as well as CPD, we're doing it jointly with them, will really dive into those details of how we're enforcing, how we're monitoring, how the tiers work, what folks have to do. It's all the nitty gritty, it's the numbers, it's the detail. And that's why we have that in rules and regs versus ordinance, because we know that there's going to be a little bit of calibration that's going to be needed as we get this rolling, as we see how the data is coming back to us. There will be some tweaks that are needed. So we really wanted that in rules and regulations versus stuck in an ordinance that has this long drawn out process with it. And the whole goal of the citywide regulation is for folks to achieve a specified single occupancy vehicle rate. And so we have currently base rates established based on each of these neighborhood contexts from blueprints. You can see here, right, like this is urban, urban edge, the suburban, right? We looked at each of those, and we looked at residential and non-residential contexts within each of those neighborhood contexts to help us understand what an existing building in those contexts could be expected to produce in terms of a mode share in terms of single occupancy vehicles. And that gives us our base rate. And then based on the type of development, right? So office, commercial, industrial, residential, the size of the development, right? Which shakes out into these tiers here, the location in the city, which are these neighborhood contexts again, and your proximity to transit options, you'll have a different reduction based on all those factors. So it's really hard to tell you that there's a X percentage reduction across the board. It will differ based on where you're building, what you're building, how you're building, all that good stuff. But there is a reduction, tied to each one of those scenarios that folks will need to achieve by implementing TDM strategies. You can see how the tiers work out there in the bottom. This will be kind of a tiered, or the regulations, or the requirements, excuse me, are broken down into 3 tiers. And so there's tier 0, kind of smaller properties, tier 1, which are moderately sized properties, and then tier 2, which are larger properties. And how the regulations differ between them is here. So those tier 0, those small properties, let me bounce back again to familiarize you. So like these properties here, these are actually exempt. So this is the only piece of the puzzle that's exempt from this regulation. Those properties just aren't big enough, don't have enough recurring revenue to really support a TDM plan. And then just in terms of trips on our system, tier 1 and tier 2 are really producing a lot of those new trips. And so, tier 0 is currently exempt. Again, as we get that data in and we're seeing how things are fleshing out, those tiers could change, but right now tier 0 is exempt. The requirements for tier 1 and tier 2 largely mirror each other. So I'll just talk about them together, and then I'll talk about the difference for tier 2. So they both need to implement TDM infrastructure. So talking about showers and locker rooms for bike commuters, a transit screen, a secured bike parking area, that's above and beyond. I should mention, when we're talking about bike parking, this is kind of above and beyond the existing requirements that are in the zoning code for bike parking, right? Something secure, something with a repair kit with area for you to maintenance your bike, things like that. So things that are built into that ground that aren't easy to kind of move or take away. They'll all be required a transportation coordinator, someone the city can talk to who has direct communication with regarding the TDM plan, someone who's knowledgeable about that TDM plan. And then of course we encourage membership with our TMAs. I think there's TMAs on the call. They're set up to do this type of thing already, to implement TDM, to help folks strategize marketing and what strategies are right for them. So we'll always encourage that membership. For tier 2, the only difference is that there's an added element of programmatic strategies that are required. So offering a subsidized or free EcoPass to folks, offering micromobility credits, offering a bike share system, for a development, things like that. In terms of monitoring and compliance, there's teeth to this, which we thought was really important and we heard was really important from folks. And so for monitoring, both Tier 1 and Tier 2 will be required to submit annual reports to the city. They're kind of self-reporting to us that they are maintaining their TDM strategies, that infrastructure is still up and running, accessible to their tenants, that their programmatic strategies are still being paid for. We'll need to see receipts or that contract with RTD for those eco passes, or kind of whatever strategy they're using. We'll need to see some sort of receipt documentation that it's continuing. That's self-reporting. We also have written into the rules and regulations, the draft rules and regulations that we have, that we can do, I think we're calling them unannounced verification checks. And so we can drop in on properties and make sure that, that photo that they submitted wasn't from 5 years ago or something. And we'll also have a requirement that buildings need to put up some signage that says that they are, I don't know exactly what the signage will say, right? But it will say something to the effect of like, this is a requirement of the city and county of Denver. You should be offered transportation, incentives. If you're not, call 311 or something to that effect. And so residents can self-report if they're not getting strategies or, getting those commuting options, those eco passes, whatever that property is supposed to be providing. They can self-report that to us as well, and then we can follow up with that verification check. The Tier 2 properties, those bigger ones, will be required a survey to survey their tenants every 2 years. And what we're measuring there is that they're actually achieving that single occupancy vehicle rate that we have established for them. And so that's key, right? So we can monitor how this program is actually working. In terms of compliance, it's pretty simple on the front end. If you don't give us a TDM plan with your site plan approval, right? We have it really looped into that site plan approval process on the development side. There's not much difference for them other than they need to submit one more piece of documentation. So we've made this as seamless as possible. There's no extra hoops that they have to jump through. They just need to submit that extra plan document. If they don't do that, they're not going to get approval on their site plan. If they fail to install their infrastructure, they're not going to get a CO, right? So we kind of have some hard stops there. Like you can't get out of this. There's, you won't get a CO, you won't get your approval, you won't be able to move forward in the process unless you provide us with these things. Kind of on the back end, if folks are not providing their annual reports, if we see through verification checks that they're not offering their TDM strategies, we will remind folks of their obligation, give them the benefit of the doubt, give them, I think it's written in like a 60-day compliance window. If they do not comply within that window, we will escalate to administrative citations. So kind of move forward quickly with some monetary incentive to comply. For the Tier 2 properties, so I mentioned here they're required to do surveys and achieve that single occupancy vehicle rate. If they are not achieving that single occupancy vehicle rate that we've established, that they are supposed to meet by implementing TDM, we have a tiered approach really focused on resolution, right? Because the point here is not necessarily to be a new revenue stream for the city. It's not to be penalizing people. The goal here is to help the city meet its single occupancy vehicle goals. And so we really structured this failure to achieve this SOV rate as a tiered approach focused on resolution. And so we'll work with them to change out strategies, to maybe implement better, encourage them to reach out to the TMA, right, to see if they can help them implement things better, market things better, whatever the issue is that we can really narrow in on, or the TMAs can help them narrow in on, is where we'll focus the first 3 tiers of that approach, right? So they have several opportunities to meet their goals. If after 3 of those resolutions, they're still not meeting their goals, then we do get into administrative citations again for every trip that they're kind of over that rate, that SOV rate that we've established for them. There are some caveats here, right? If we get our first 5 buildings in and none of them are meeting their goals, then there's probably something wrong with our numbers. And so there's some things written into the rules and regulations about how, in that case, right, we won't enforce against those properties. We'll fix our numbers and then get back out there. So there is some stuff written into there just so we're not, we went in too hard and had too big of reductions, which I don't think that we did, but just in case, right, we're not going to be holding people to standards that are too high for this moment, right? Some other requirements that I'd like to highlight for folks. For folks who are familiar, there's a small lot parking exemption in the zoning code. So essentially, lots under a specific square footage, and it's not coming to the top of my head, but lots under a specific square footage that are rebuilding do not have to provide parking. And so those properties will be automatically put into the tier 2 category, right? So they don't have to provide parking, but we will require that they do implement more TDM strategies, that higher level of tier 2 requirements. Another thing to point out is that overparking will create a larger SOB reduction that's required. So, if you're overparking, you will be required to put in more TDM strategies. You can see here how again, everything with this plan is kind of really trying to be right-sized, right? So there's no blanket 5% extra. There's no, any of that. It's really based on your context, your tier, how much you're doing something. So you can see how that plays in here. And these are percentage point reductions, right? So if you're coming in here and you have this, your original goal was to reduce your SOB rate by 6%, you're overparking by 12%, you have an extra 2%, so you're looking at an 8% reduction. So hopefully that makes sense. I kind of fumbled through that, I think, but hopefully hopefully I explained it well enough in the beginning so that it makes sense for folks. But just letting you know that there will be extra requirements for folks to put in more TDM strategies if they are overparking, to really encourage folks to evaluate how much parking do they actually need, right? Are they building 150% of parking that they need just in case? Like, could they get by without? And so really helping folks reevaluate how much parking that they need. Put together 3 examples here. I'm not going to walk through in detail each one, but I'll leave this up here for a second. Just pick 3 random locations in the city. None of these mean anything, just trying to get different context in the city. And so you can see here how the different tiers, how the different neighborhood contexts, which is that second bullet there, and then how being near high frequency transit can lead you to different reductions, right? So tier 2 urban center high frequency transit, you're looking at 8%. Tier 1 general urban high frequency transit, you're looking at 2.5%. So just how those are really trying to be right sized. And then underneath each of these, this bottom part is showing all the different ways that you can meet that reduction. And so this list isn't all encompassing, right? It just threw together some random scenarios that seem to fit well together that potentially could make up someone's TDM program. There are different ways that folks could put this together to meet their reductions, but you can see how, potentially developers would have the opportunity of just doing one big thing and getting their reduction out of the way. They could just offer eco passes and be done. They could just charge parking fees in some instances, right? Not in this instance with the 8%, but in this instance with the 4% reduction, they could do that and be done. Or they can choose to do a lot of little things, which I've tried to highlight on each of them. So, they could do a bunch of strategies that are smaller reductions that add up to that big goal. And I'll maybe move here just so you can see, this is currently our list. I think, Lana and I are working through this every day. I think there's maybe a couple that aren't on here from the last time that I pulled this that have been added, and maybe some that have been tweaked a little bit, but this just gives you a good idea of the wide array of things that we'll offer folks to include in their TDM plans. So definitely not a one size fits all. Folks can combine any number of these. Obviously, there's like a few restrictions. You can't do parking fees and parking cash out and things like that, right? There's a few restrictions in that sense, but overall, folks can really kind of pick and choose what they think works best for their property, their location in the city, their tenant mix, whatever is influencing their decision, they can really work with that. Just to give you a sense of next steps and timeline, and then we'll move to questions and we can kind of move back into the slides as needed. As I mentioned, the ordinance is going to our LUTI Council Committee on Tuesday. Based on that timeline, we should, or that meeting, assuming things kind of fall into line as typically happens, the ordinance would be at first reading at council on April 12th, and then the second reading, which is typically the vote and the public hearing, on April 19th. So potentially that ordinance could be adopted by April 19th. And then we're working on following the ordinance pretty closely with the rules and regulations. There is a required public hearing with that. We tentatively have that scheduled for the 29th. There's a lot of, we have to get that to the city clerk's office to be published, and it has to be published for at least 20 days. So full disclosure, that date might fluctuate a little bit, but that's what we're aiming for right now. Just an FYI, but there is that public hearing available for those rules and regulations. And the ways to be involved, right? Ways for your groups to be involved. Obviously I just mentioned 2 opportunities for public comments, both of the ordinance phase in the second reading. There is also actually a public comment period in this LUTI Council Committee as well, that actually we weren't aware that was happening, but it's great. We're glad that it is. So there's an opportunity at LUTI, the second reading, and at the rules and regulations public hearing for testimony and public comments to help decision makers make the decision on whether to adopt this or not. Many of you have ties to the development community, work with the development community in various capacities. We really could use help spreading the word. If you have newsletters, if you just know folks that you want to forward information to, right now we have a list of about 140 developers that we have been emailing about webinars that we held in February and that we'll be holding again early or like mid next month, I believe, to walk the developers through this plan. But if there's more that you want to help us reach out to, that'd be great. We really, really, really don't want this to go live and have a slew of developers being like, wait, I didn't know what this was. I don't know what this was, and then holding up the review process. We'd like to. I think it'll happen no matter what, but the more that we can minimize that, the better. So if you have any connections that you can help us really get that word out, that'd be great. If you have newsletters or things like that, I kind of touched on that before. That'd be great to get that word out there and even celebrate if you're on board with that. And then speaking opportunities at your organizations, right? So I think that's more of that outreach. But if you have groups that are interested in hearing about this, a developer group, it doesn't even have to be developer groups, right? Anyone who's kind of interested in what we're doing here, please reach out to me and let me know, and we can definitely see if we can come speak to them about this regulation. So I'll stop there. That gives us about 20 minutes or so, right? What time is it? Yeah, about 20 minutes or so for questions and answers. And I can definitely go back and talk about anything that I might have breezed over or anything that folks need. And maybe, there's a lot of folks on the call. I don't know if folks want to utilize like the raise hand button so we can just keep track of who all has questions.
Zach, just a couple questions in the chat. So a question about a specific zip code. It's all of Denver, so anything in the city and county of Denver would be included. And then there's a question about, is there any concern that these laudable goals could increase costs to develop and reduce meaningfully affordable housing? If you can speak to that.
Yeah, so the goal with this plan when we started this off was not to increase lease rates by more than 1%. And so that I think has been maintained right throughout. Of course, we don't know how costs are being impacted by COVID, right? So potentially, 1 to 1.5%. But I think there's a real opportunity here for these strategies to be offered offsetting costs, transportation costs to families. So, transportation is the second largest cost to a family. If you're getting a free EcoPass, if you're getting access to a car share membership, any of the strategies really that can help you not own a car, right? I think I was just seeing data that the annual cost of a car is about $9,000. If your family can get by with just one instead of two because you all have access to a transit pass, then that's a huge savings for a family. I will say that we've worked a lot with the host, the housing. What is that acronym? Sustainable housing.
Stability.
Yeah, folks are
it's the Housing Stability Office.
Yeah, thank you. Host is all I know them by. Sorry, but we've worked with them a lot just about affordable housing, how to include affordable housing. I guess this isn't necessarily talking about like the affordability of market rate, right? We're talking specifically about affordable projects. But we talked with them a lot, and Other cities that have done TDM have actually excluded affordable housing projects from the requirements. We thought about that for a minute. It didn't sit right with us that, you know, potentially you could have a market rate development next door to an affordable housing development. The market rate folks are getting an eco pass and have places to fix all their bikes, and the affordable housing developments aren't required to do any of that. So we did keep them in, right? There's no specific lane uses or anything like that that are excluded from this regulation. We will definitely work with affordable housing developers, right? If they're coming to us and they're like, listen, I can't get that extra 2%. If we do this and this, we're at our pro forma and we can't get that extra 2%. We can definitely work with them. I think the caveat being, we're not doing that for developments that are coming in with like 5% affordable units, right? It's for like the truly affordable housing developers that we can really work with. But that being said, we'll see how much they need that assistance. We heard from our host partners that a lot of developments are doing this type of work anyway, a lot of affordable housing developments, whether, I think for a variety of reasons, right? It helps reduce transportation costs for their tenants. It helps them in their grant applications or loan applications to have those kind of incentives in there for their tenants. And so a lot of them are doing this kind of stuff. And so we'll really work with them to make sure that we're not overburdening them and we're not restricting affordable housing from being built, but that also we're not saying affordable housing developments don't need to do this and don't need to provide these options for their tenants. And so that was a really long answer for that. Short story for market rate, it should be no more than 1% difference in housing costs, and then potentially a larger offset in terms of the benefits that the strategies that are being offered could provide folks.
Thanks, Zach. And Carly has her hand up.
Sorry, sure. I'm cooking, so I don't want to show you guys my messy kitchen right now. I'm the one that asked about affordable housing, and this really kind of stems from direct conversations we've had in the field with developers. First off is kind of managing expectations of those developers. I think there's an assumption that if they call the local TMA that we can buy them all bus passes, and we just don't have those funds. And I just a word to capacity, thinking if this comes online and we're really successful, what does that look like from a capacity perspective for the TMAs? I don't have an answer there, but I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar screen. And then just kind of lovingly lift up this idea of a lot of these really beautiful strategies do add cost to the development. And I'm wondering if we can be kind of clear about managing expectations of who is going to pay for those, because a lot of the developers we work with, even the for-profit developers, bulk at the cost of providing a transit pass. It's just too expensive for them. When we talk to the affordable housing providers, unless they have a supportive services budget, it's way out of reach for them as well. And I never know what the actual answer is there, but for a lot of our folks, these things might just actually add cost. We've seen that the RTD passes, they get packaged into the cost of the lease and usually get trickled down to the actual tenant. And so I just wanted to put that on everybody's radar screen. This is absolutely fantastic, and climate change is real. We have to do something, but I am a little bit concerned about some unintended consequences. We say it won't really affect affordable housing, but I do wonder what that means for the city of Denver when everything seems to be 60% AMI or higher, and that is affordable housing. That's not really affordable to a lot of the folks living in our community. So I know there's a lot there, but I just wanted to put that out there for this group as we're marching down this road together. Thank you.
No, we really appreciate that insight, Carly. And honestly, we had discussions with the development community in different forums and hadn't heard such a strong voice on that concern. So, but that being said, what Zach had mentioned, we have worked with our housing office and have included language that will allow us to be flexible with, as you say, actually truly meaningfully affordable housing. This will have to be a flexible, iterative process. And as we're hearing from folks, and we also designed it to be flexible. So if paying for an eco pass is not the right approach, then there's other ways to meet the goals that are certainly a less cost, but definitely appreciate that insight. So thank you. And Stuart has their hand up too.
Yes, I have a comment and a question. On my comment, I know there's a parallel effort being conducted right now to lower the parking standards for affordable housing to 0.1 per dwelling unit. And I also just wanted to underscore, we worked with the 101 Broadway project, which is affordable housing, and the developer built at 0.2 parking spaces per dwelling unit. And to let you know the actual cost, every parking space he didn't have to build saved him $66,000 per parking space. And so to turn around and ask him to offer tenants an eco-pass is quite cheap in comparison. But I think the important part is that the city needs to be flexible with the parking requirements, because that's where it does get somewhat complicated. And I do support going to a 0.1 parking standard for affordable housing that has transit access available to them. So that's just my opinion. Most of the developers that I have worked save money, save significant money because of TDM. But you have to get to them before they start designing their property and such. My question is on the example of 4th and University, that's Cherry Creek. It said that there was a 2.5% reduction required, and if they joined the TMA, which would be us, Transportation Solutions, that we would give them credit for a 3% reduction. So in that particular example, all that property owner or developer would need to do would be to commit to join our organization. And then coupled with that, is that going to be forever? Because if they sign up for the first year and they clear, you know, we want a longer term commitment so that we can price things accordingly.
Yeah, no, we would want to see in their annual reports that they're continuing to have membership with you. So not just that first year, we would want to see that they continue that throughout in perpetuity, right? As long as this program's in place and the annual reports are due and that's their strategy, we would want to see that. And so, yeah, maybe we can work with you to see what that, or with, you know, with all the TMAs, right? If that's an option for folks to see, like, if you just, I don't know, maybe we can have a form that you can just sign and say this property is here. I don't know how you all, or I guess just a receipt for membership, right? That might suffice. But yeah, we will want to see that continuing throughout, not just 1 year.
So this example is correct that all they have to do is join our TMA.
Yeah, for that tier 1. And I did pick like a side of University, or like a side of, I don't know, I picked a specific location so I could get that general urban, because not everywhere in that area is general urban. So
right.
This is like a very specific example that I picked specifically just to get that one. But yeah, it would be a 2.5% for this, you know, this specific, and that, yes, sorry. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know if other folks have questions. Something I was hoping to get from this group is just ideas on where else we should be bringing this, who we should be bringing it to. If you have ideas, as Zach said, if you are all working with the development community to raise this, or if there's opportunities that we might be able to speak and bring this to different groups. But just curious on if folks have ideas for where we should be looking to keep getting the word out. What I'm hearing is we're doing a great job and everybody knows about it.
One question for the group, if I may ask. You are doing a great job, by the way. I really like how this is unfolded. With the mix of the five TMAs, we have 2 that are part of a larger organization, DDP and then Denver South, but the other 3 were kind of independent. And I will have to get 100% cost recovery when I work with a developer. And I don't know if there's any value in us trying to coordinate our pricing or how we're going to offer it. I mean, I don't have a problem with the apple or and oranges approach for it, but where you do have a developer that might be building in multiple areas, you know, the fees could be dramatically different. I don't know if DDP will offer this service for free and then we charge, so it will matter what side of the street you're on at some point. So that's kind of my general question.
This is Carly, and I have no answer, but I really love that question, Stuart.
This is Andrew from DDP. I would just add too, there's lots of areas that, you know, are nearby but don't have a TMA that supports them. You know, they use Dr. Cobb sort of as their backup, but don't necessarily have that option either.
Yeah, this is Mike Hughes with West Corridor. I'm happy to chime in here and suggest that if there is a need for us, for Stuart and Andrew and I and others on the TMA side to get together and talk about how we would try to make sure that we weren't sending someone howling to DOTI or to the city council because they thought they were being gouged by one TMA or you know, charged more than they had to pay when they developed in a different part of town. If we need to do some homework, I'm happy to participate in that conversation so we don't create pushback just simply by what it costs to join a TMA.
I'd do that with you, Mike. This is Andrew.
Yeah, this is Eric with NATC. We're kind of in the same boat that we'd love to have that conversation with the TMAs and coordinate a little better on that pricing strategy.
And this is also Carly, just to also give developers, all of this stuff is really brand new and it is very confusing. And there are a lot of really great developers out there who are trying to do their best, but yeah, really setting and managing expectations, I think, will help us get broader buy-in.
This is Evan with Denver South. I think the main key will be if it will be Dr. Cog, right? Because all the TMAs or most of the TMAs are under the Way to Go banner. So I think Dr. Cog would need to be involved in those conversations on fees for service.
Hi, this is Steve Erickson with Dr. Cobb, and yeah, listening to the conversation, and for the benefit of those that may not know it, Dr. Cobb and our Way to Go staff, our outreach staff, really operate essentially like a TMA does in any of those areas that aren't specifically covered. So yeah, I do think we should have a conversation as a group about that and maybe be able to bring that forward to the city, to DOTI, to talk through it.
Yeah, we definitely appreciate all of that thought and recognizing the role that all the TMAs play here and the role in meeting our goals and these new requirements. So want to continue being thought partners in this. And if there are ways that the city can help, you know, to the point about that this is confusing and new and developers might need help. So if the city can help developers more through the process in a way that you're hearing from them, and then also to help you all and to coordinate to ensure alignment, definitely appreciate those conversations. Are there any other thoughts from folks, maybe outside of the TMA considerations, but just how we can ensure smooth rollout here? And again, it's going to be iterative, but other ideas on rolling this out and promoting it, or other considerations?
This is Carly. If I can just pitch for equitability, which I really, quite honestly, don't know if I know what that means anymore. But there are definitely some folks we work with that are absolutely essential workers, and they are going places at times that RTD just does not run, and they have tools and other things that they just cannot use a bike for. And so thinking about just keeping equity front and center so that this is actually something that can help move everybody forward rather than is seen as just adding more cost to working class folks. That's a real perception out there in the community, and I'd really hate for this to get ensnarled in that perception. So that's just a pitch I'll make on that. Again, I don't know what the answer is, but I just think it's important that we keep that front and center.
Yep, that makes a lot of sense. And, you know, I think we've been trying to really lead that this is designed to alleviate transportation costs. And as Zach mentioned, if it means that you can forego one of the cars in your household because you have access to a car share or carpooling, but recognizing it's not one size fits all. And a lot of people will still drive their personal cars and need to do that and hopefully can get some benefit from this in other ways. But that overall it's net helping reduce costs and expanding access. But hear you, that is such an important point, and would love to continue thinking through ways that we message that and make sure that it's true, that those benefits are happening for folks.
That's great. We have about 2 minutes. If anyone else has anything else, any other questions, any other thoughts, I think this is a great conversation for sure. If not, then we can definitely end it. Maybe Alana and I will kind of stay here as folks log off, just if anyone has like a extra or a last minute question or anything that they want to ask us. But thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it. Hopefully that was a helpful background for you. Feel free to reach out if you think of any questions afterwards or you want to talk about anything. Definitely please include me if you'd like in you know, the TMA strategization, or you know, we could two-part it because I think we've talked to the TMAs about potentially having a list of strategies that you can offer folks just kind of upfront and available, so they know that you all are there and available. And so maybe we could, you know, do that in a 30-minute meeting, and then you all can you know, see what the costs are and all that kind of stuff that we were just talking about in, you know, the last 30 minutes or something without me if you don't want me there. Or, I mean, I don't know what I would bring to that conversation, so maybe I don't need to be there, but yeah.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.